Welcome to the Strategic Insights Podcast. I'm lucky enough today to be joined by Paul Kennedy. Paul Kennedy is our BSc in our world, but a senior business solutions executive. Paul helps me with a lot of my clients when they're looking for different solutions to help solve nagging issues inside their use of their ERP as well as any major business requirement. Paul, welcome to the podcast today.
Thanks, Andrew.
Hey, Paul, I can't do your background justice because I actually snagged you out of industry for a project, and now you've joined us in the lovely side of supporting customers. Can you give everybody a little background on how you came into this position at Strategic and your background just in the space in general?
Well, geez, I came back to Strategic. I say back to Strategic because Strategic introduced me to ERP. I never worked for Strategic, but I was a customer. Back, when was it? 94, 93. Strategic launched a project with the company I was working with, which was in the gaming industry. And I was trained by Michael Anson Cartwright and a couple others in Strategic. And so I got introduced to the company then and built and maintained a relation with Strategic and some the people from Strategic for all those years. And then back 2018, I decided to come back and join you guys. So we've been together working as a BSc. My current role is BSc, so I help customers. I help customers design solutions to their problems, to their ERP deployments. I help them understand what their issues are and how to solve them. So it's kind of a dream role for me because, again, I'm there to help. And all throughout my career, people have helped me. So I can kind of do some payback in this position.
That's an awesome full circle story. I know that I always get wild because we get into situations and I'm like, oh, we've got an MES requirement here and, in materials execution. And all of a sudden I look over and Paul's smiling and I'm like, oh, let me guess, you've got experience with this as well. How many different product sets have you worked with us? Yeah. It's been a number.
Well, yeah, actually, since just joining in 2018, I was project manager, functional consultant. I managed the HelpServe team and I've managed the EDI team. So I've been really lucky and working with some really good people. But prior to that, coming out of industry, you're right. I came out of a large tier one automotive where my last position was MES director and then I was IT operations director. But then the core of my role and my positions there over 17 years was competency center manager for QED. So managed a large team, a global team, 40 sites, deployments. So I really got to spend a lot of time working with QED, knowing the QED, going to explorers and knowing and learning about their suppliers. So kind of a perfect set of experiences to get into the BSE role. So I can appreciate and convey experiences with the customers in many of the areas.
Paul, that's what I appreciate. I appreciate the credibility you bring to the position due to the time that you've sat in those seats. And that's actually probably the reason why we brought you on today. So Strategic, since you were overseeing the EDI department at Strategic for a while, we have a number of SIG IP or SIG software products out there. And one specifically we see that's helping out a majority of customers as these changes are happening are surrounding EDI, SIG EDI and ESER, which is the service offering surrounding it a little bit. But I thought for those that are logging in and listening to this today, let's get a little background. I want to ask you, what is EDI used for in our space, Paul?
Yeah, no, it's a good basic question. In fact, we got to understand that because it's really a core functionality has been introduced all the way back to the 80s when it comes to communicating business to business. So it can be pretty scary and confusing, but really it's not. It's a simple process of taking an electronic document, moving it, transforming it, translating it, and getting it into the QED system in and out. So essentially, if you take, for instance, a purchase order or an advanced shipping notice, invoices, all these documents have standards. There's many different standards organizations that publish specifications on documents. So what it does essentially, it eliminates human errors. Instead of keying a purchase order in, an EDI purchase order that comes through can be imported directly into your system, and you eliminate a human error element. But there's a lot of different elements to EDI, and I want to talk to you walk you guys through some of the different main elements. So first of all, we start off what's called a VAN, Value Added Network. Think of it as a third-party mailbox, and it's a service provider who exchanges documents. It represents different trading partners think of it as literally a mailbox, right? And then those files get moved. So there's an FTP functionality. So different types of tools move those files around. An EDI file will have its own specific format. And so we have to translate that format, that specification, according to that specification, into what's called a flat file, or an SNF file for QED terms. And then that file actually then has to be picked up by QED and transformed into the QED data repository. So there's a number of steps associated to that. And then even though it's called standards, that you have your different standards, X12 and EDIFACT, VDA, ODET. There's lots of different standards out there. How you use those individual segments can differ. So you can't just, it's not like just reading an email. You literally have to look at the content and the specification of that trading partner and program it correctly into the system. So there's a lot of work associated to it. Although maybe 90% of it is common, that 10% will get you. So it forces you to go through a deep dive into making sure that your configurations are set up correctly. And then each trading partner, you have to go through for each document, each trading partner. So there's a lot of legwork to do.
So I assume that 10% is the scary part, right? Or just the getting it all set up and running well for customers, versus being manual. But once set up, I mean, the risk avoidance and the ease of use and the hands-free, which is required in some industries, right? For that type of communication back and forth for orders and order acknowledgement is critical for business.
Absolutely paramount. And what gets you, and why it's really important is, there's a lot of costs associated to this, right? You get a lot of benefits from EDI. I'll touch on that a little bit later, but let's talk about the cost too, because it's such a huge point. And in most companies, the costs of EDI get buried. You don't know it. You accept it as a cost of doing business, but these can run into hundreds of thousands of dollars for a company typically to manage EDI. So you've got, let's break it down a little bit. So you're going to have your van mailbox costs, right? Mm-hmm. Then you've got the translation element. And so there's a whole industry around a value-added network and translation. Many of the providers, when they translate, they'll charge you either by document or kilocharacter, and then from the van side also to move that around. So there's big dollars fly around in this industry. And then you've got the services associated to setting it up. There's a lot of professional services to set up translations. And then you've got the software. If you're doing translations, classically, companies are going to have their own server. They're going to have third-party translation software. They're going to have to contract with a software provider to write maps or go through training. And then you've got, on the QED side, you've got the same thing or similar thing. You've got the e-commerce side. You've got to be licensed for that. Although the current releases and current clouds, it's already part of the package. Historically, you had to buy those e-commerce licenses. And then you have to create all those maps. So there's some massive costs, and costs are buried and deep. And the good news is, guess what? Of course, we can solve that for you, for many of our customers. That's why I want to take this opportunity to talk to you and make sure the word gets out.
Absolutely, because historically there is, like you said, there's an entire industry for value-added networks, kilocharacters, the old rip and read style, if you will, if you're familiar with that terminology. And a lot of times when you think cost, that mapping setup is just the first step, and not even the only step of what you're going to have to manage long term in a historical mapping configuration for setting up EDI. And I'm glad to hear how we're helping customers, solve these issues, because more and more customers in different industries, because obviously automotive, it's been there, forever. It's been a mainstay of hands-free communication, but we're starting to see more and more EDI used across the board in all industries. And those industries aren't really ready or used to that requirement, that setup. But the benefits you get, when you're talking, how does it improve supply chain operation, for example, Paul? Can you give us a couple examples of how it minimizes those types of activities?
Well, think of this. So, for instance, mentioned earlier about entering a PO. So you eliminate with EDI, if you've got an inbound PO coming in and you've got the software set up, that can pull in right into your system. And so you've got your demand there. The turnaround of that, of course, is when you do a shipment, you're going to send an ASN back to the customer. So the customer knows at that point in time what you've shipped them. So think in terms of supply chain. You don't have to wait until it shows up at the door to figure if you're short. You can see immediately from an ASN, what's en route to me, and it's so critical, especially in automotive when you're just in time. You don't have inventory to mess around. The more inventory you have, of course, the more money it costs you. The profitability is lost. So ASNs are critical. Turnaround data is part of the EDI solutions when it comes to purchase orders, item numbers, and item cross references. On the purchasing side, so let's say on your own side, you've sent a purchase order out to a supplier, and that supplier sends you an ASN. Well, with QAD, that ASN gets populated as what's called a PO shipper, an inbound PO shipper. So you can see directly in QAD with your supply chain tools, again, what's in transit, and it integrates directly into MRP, and you can do your plan around it. But then when it shows up on the door, all you have to do is confirm that. Say, yeah, I got my shipment in. Of course, you can audit it, and with QED's tools, you can scan that process to audit it. But it imports all that data, again, eliminating human error. You're receiving done literally in seconds. So it's to have that vision in place, to get it in place is a huge benefit.
Paul, you make a really good point in regards to having access to real-time data, right? We're talking about knowledge is power and understanding, whether you're having short ship or too much shipped, and being able to control your inventory for your planning. It's critical, especially like you said, with just in time. And that's probably, I'd say, pervasive throughout all the industries, right? So if you're talking food and beverage, for example, when people are creating massive amounts of food, to know that their next shipment of, if they're creating pasta or if they're creating pancakes, they have to switch over to possibly a different run line, allows them to, not waste money or lose time in a production cycle, knowing full well what's coming into their dock on a daily basis, and then streamlining how fast that comes in on the dock as well as gets onto the floor, gets into production. Knowledge is power, and it sounds like that's just speeding that process through.
Yeah, I mean, the profession of supply chain management, when you introduce EDI, it really just it's a required, it's an infrastructure. It has to be there, or else you're guessing. So yeah, especially some of the big customers like Walmart, for instance, they demand what's called AS2 communication with EDI, and which means they push that information directly from their server to yours. And it's the way to go. In fact, it's the target structure, but the whole communication is just mandatory in order if you're going to execute a professional supply chain.
So I think we've covered on what EDI is and how, especially the Walmart example, how it can be impactful for every industry. Life science, automotive, food and bev, wholesale, for example, and those requirements being brought on to you by these larger accounts as well as smaller ones. Let's get into a little bit of how does SIG help people that are having these EDI requirements come up, whether it be a small company or even a large company replacing an outdated, possibly EDI system?
Yeah. So good question. I'm going to start with people, right? So the SIG people really is, again, the reason why I joined Strategic is because of the quality of the people, the ethics associated to the company, and having worked with the EDI team, I was just in love with those guys. They have a team of 10 people now working full time supporting EDI with customers, and it's a major element of SIG's overall team. So we've got professional consultants, 7 of them, led by Vinod Kumar. And then we have 3 people who are doing EDI, we call EDI managed services. So really 2 different elements, right? With operating EDI, you've got the setup and the technical infrastructure of EDI, and then you've got the traffic, the day-to-day management of that. EDI, people who aren't really familiar with EDI and the dependencies, it is data dependent, of course. So if you're using EDI, you're, as maybe your manager, you're setting up the infrastructure, and we have lots of tools to help you with that, and we'll talk more about that. But from a managed services side, and when you're working with your users, you have to make sure that the data is correct in this system in order to populate. In our previous examples, we talked about a purchase order. So if you have a customer sending you a purchase order, you need to have the underlying data structure within QED in place. You've got to have your customer set up. You've got to have your item cross-references set up. And so in order for that EDI to come in, it will populate. It may fail, however. For instance, if you don't have If you don't have that customer set up, of course that document's going to fail. It won't know where to put the data. And that's where your day-to-day activity has to be in place, where you have to monitor those inbound documents, whether they were processed successfully or not. Now, it sounds pretty simple, but when you get into large organizations and you have hundreds of documents flying around every day in and out of the system, it's a huge concern. So what we have done and what we really excel in is exception management. So we offer a managed services set of solutions depending on the customer's internal resources, their capabilities, where their problems are, to help them literally go from top management all the way down to the person who's entering those individual documents and entering the purchase orders and so on. So we can monitor for a customer all of their traffic that comes in and out, and we can give them exception messages, exception spreadsheets to try and give them focus about what their problems are and what data they need to fix. And it's really valuable. We have many customers who just love this service because it means that they can avoid drilling through 30,000 pages of documents every day. And they just get a formatted email. Here you go, Joe. Here's your 6 POs that you need to deal with today. They deal with it, and they're done. Their job's done in a half hour instead of spending half a day trying to figure out what they need to do. And then, of course, the impact of that, of course, is the better supply chain execution.
Absolutely. I think one of the biggest things I've seen in my client base is the fact that you get a small company that doesn't have the manpower to be able to support EDI or want to have to add that type of headcount, and we can either take care of that fully for them, or we have a client that is just seeing such an uptick in amount of EDI work that he either has to add to his team or his team is spending way too much time diving into the weeds of those documents, as you noted, and it allows them to focus on just creating, fixing the exceptions, and of course allowing them to be more future focused to support the company on new activities, revenue generation, you name it. And it's one of those things where everybody's like, well, I can handle that internally, and then you can. It's a lot of legwork, and it's very expensive. So if we can shorten that, gap to market, it's not only a faster response to your customers, so you're having a better experience for the customer in your entire sales cycle, but you're also helping your employees be successful at their role because we're giving you a very streamlined list of things you need to correct, right? So it's a lot easier to do your role on a daily basis without being burdened on going down the rabbit hole that we know exists in the EDI world.
Yeah, you can imagine yourself if you're trying to manage all your EDI documents and you get a formatted email that maybe you're in charge of outbound ASNs rather than, and your EDI report comes through and it's got all these different documents and all these different elements, and you got to figure out your job. But now with the services that we provide, very simply and easily, you get a formatted email where you can break in, see exactly what documents failed, why they failed, and how to fix it. And so it's huge value for the customer. So the managed services side is just a wonderful tool. And try and hire somebody with EDI skill sets. They are rare, far between. It's difficult to skill to. It's not that it's technically complicated. It's just a specialization. It's hard to find.
Absolutely. And what are those high-level services our team offers? Because I know that we offer many flavors of SIG-Serve. Just break it down high level so people listening can understand if it's, wanting for us to send them just documentation on where they're managed by exception to, full-blown, we are now your outsourced EDI firm. Give a little flavor of that if you would, Paul.
Well, yeah. So let's start from the bottom up. So you've got your document management. So your document comes in, you've got to figure out what your problem is. You got to then go into QED, fix the underlying data, and then reprocess the document. Again, we can provide that feedback to tell them exactly where the problems are, what to do, fix it. Then go on a higher level, right? You've got, from a manager standpoint, you need to understand, is my staff managing all my EDI documents? Can I, I need to see, I understand my individuals have a task list to manage their documents. But again, as a manager, I need to know if all that work's getting done. And so I have tool sets available through Managed EDI to be able to see aggregately by my plant, what is done, what are my number of errors, what's my trend line, am I doing a good job, and am I not doing a good job? So again, we have a monitoring tool set so a manager can see exactly what they're doing. And so that's from the day-to-day standpoint. But then on the overall, the technical side of EDI. So there can be failures in all of those different links, and our team can provide full administration of all their EDI setup, all their EDI trading partner setup. For instance, what's really important is reactivity to new business requirements. So say, for instance, you've got a new customer, and they want to do EDI. The classic EDI flow, as explained earlier, is very time consuming to set it up because you're dealing with multiple different organizations. Our team, again, we're very experienced in all of these areas. We know where the tricks are. We know how to set up the system effectively. We've got a whole library of maps that we can leverage to start and make things run efficiently. So our professional consulting services can deal with all the high-level planning, all the high-level activities associated to setting up the infrastructures.
Yeah, I'm glad that we touched that. So from day-to-day operations, from just the initial map setup, I mean, you basically can pick your flavor, and you can change depending on your company's needs as you grow, right? So whether you need a full-blown support, whether you need exemption management, whether you need just a cool reporting tool to allow your team to work internally. I know, for example, I've seen customers that were running one person that needed 4, able to continue running 1. And I've seen people that were running 4 due to retirements and different reasons go down to using none. Right. So there's lots of flavors depending on how the organization wants to manage that internally. Now, as a service side, I think there's a good grasp there. But let's dive in a little bit. What makes SIG EDI different than traditional EDI?
Yeah. So SIG EDI is something that our team developed. Our team of consultants, just to back up a little bit, they were actually part of the actual architecture team with QED when e-commerce was first created. So our EDI team is by far the most experienced team in the industry when it comes to especially QED. We wrote an application we call SIG EDI. Quite simply, it is a single map translator. So as opposed to a classic EDI, where you've got your van providing the documents, you've got your translating it from EDI to flat file, and then you've got your e-commerce transformation from that flat file into the QED database through a transformation map. We created a single step translation where we go directly from EDI right into the QED database. And this application resides on the QED environment. It's part of the QED. It's not a third-party application. It is a part of the infrastructure that sits on your database. The benefits of that. So think about this. An example. Let's go with an example. You've got a new customer, and they want to set up customer schedules. So that customer is going to then publish an EDI specification in the classic process. An EDI spec, then you have to manage that. You have to take that over to your translator, the third-party translator, who's going to then build a map to build that EDI file into the SNF file. And then you've got to get that done on the e-commerce side, either with your own team or outsourcing it to QED or strategic. So that element has to happen too. And then you've got to coordinate the testing of that between the customer, the translator, the transformation. And you've got to organize all the testing and validation, and of course the whole loop about error fixing. It just takes a lot of time. With SIG EDI, you just pick up the phone and you call and you say, "Hey, Brad, I've got a new map. This customer wants to set up an 8:30 customer schedule." And Brad goes, "Yeah, okay, no problem. Where's the spec? Here's the spec." And Brad literally can just take that and go and do it in a day and come back to you and say, "You're ready." So there's no messing around with dealing with multiple people and the coordination of it. It's a straightforward, quick deployment. So, and then I haven't even touched on the financial savings part of it, but what I want to highlight first was that simplification. It simplifies the whole flow massively. A target, so from a technical target, so I want to convey what an optimal target for EDI is. AS2 communication, which means direct web-based communication with your trading partner. What's that cost you? Nothing, right? You eliminate the van. Although vans, they provide a lot of service. AS2 is an optimal process. SIG EDI to do a single map translation in and out of QED. So you have a two-step process, right? You're going to communicate, connection with your trading partner, and do a straight translation. Massively simplified and much faster to administer. So then we're going to talk about cost. So ask me about cost, Andrew.
Well, before we get into cost, people should realize you just cut the errors that could possibly happen and the number of things you have to manage in half, right? So you effectively have reduced the risk, you've reduced the amount of mapping, and you reduced the amount of error points when we talk about managing communication. So you've reduced it. How does that impact cost, Paul?
All right. So obviously, the opportunity cost, first of all, I'm not even going to talk about how much you're going to save at opportunity, but it's obvious, right? You're going to eliminate errors. You're going to eliminate and improve customer service. But the cost, let's talk about then the costs for operating your EDI. So you're going to have your van costs, your mailbox costs, rather. You're going to have your translation. You're going to have your kilocharacter charges or the document charges. You're going to have the cost for your translation server, if you have that, if you're doing it in-house. You're going to have, obviously, the licensing associated with your FTP software. So there's a lot of different cost elements. So on a monthly basis, if you're operating a classic one, you're going to have some sort of variable monthly fee that comes across based off your kilocharacters and number of documents, and you've got to absorb that. With SIG EDI, the way it's licensed is really simplified. It's a subscription. You just pay for the software. There is no traffic cost. There's no volume cost associated to it. It's just your software. You're just buying a piece of software. And what we do is we train you on how to set up those individual documents, how to set up those trading partners correctly with SIG EDI and in e-commerce. So if you have, and again, you don't need to be a developer level to do this. You could just be a power user to understand how to set this up, and we could train you. And then, of course, we're always there to support you. The other side of SIG EDI is our reactivity, right? And that's hugely important. With our infrastructure, when it comes to our SIG-Serve infrastructure, you literally pick up the phone, you call us, you send us an email, or you go onto our portal and put a request in, and it's picked up immediately. It's dealt with that day. Yeah, maybe the whole work is not completed that day, but we have a team who are monitoring it all through business hours, and we have a team who will work weekends if necessary. They will cover you, and they're very, very reactive. There's no messing around about formality about documents and approvals. When you have that, we call it our help serve agreement or SIG serve app structure in place. If you need us, we're there. You pick up the phone, we'll connect, we'll do a screen share, we'll get it connected and addressed with you quickly. So that reactivity is critically important.
Yeah, you've taken a lot of the communication I used to have with my customers off the table. So I used to get the emails regarding setting up traditional EDI. Mm-hmm. Now they're just sending in, I'm getting copied on the email they're sending in to our SIG-Serve, and it's being completely handled. You're just skipping a whole point of communication, and as well as setup. So that's excellent. So, what other tools do we offer surrounding SIG EDI?
So SIG EDI is let's say the heart of everything, but there's other options and other tools available to us. Of course, we can provide and support classic EDI and e-commerce scripting. It's our bread and butter. We can support anything you need when it comes to classic EDI. But we built other tools available to help optimize your EDI. So we have one thing is called an EDI messages report. So this report is a way to concisely drill into the document library to figure out where your errors are, to identify it and focus on it. So it's a wonderful tool that we created to be able to focus into those individual documents. We've got what's called a monitoring dashboard. So we've got a management monitoring dashboard. Again, if you have a large organization, for instance, you got multiple sites, and you want to know, how are all the sites doing? Are they on top of their EDI? Are they addressing it, or is it a trouble point? And we can do that. We can literally, with access to your system, provide you with a dashboard, a live dashboard, so you can see the last 24 hours how your EDI flows have been operating. And then, of course, you take the appropriate actions. You could drill into all that detail too, to see the individual transactions if you need to. And then more concisely, we have other tools or new tools. So we have one is a invoice dashboard. So you may, for instance, be part of the financial organization, and you're reviewing invoices and then transmitting invoices. It's really important to know that they get sent and were received correctly. And so we have a dashboard to focus directly on that. And then also associated to that is an ASN dashboard. So especially in automotive, for instance, you literally, many of them, you need 20, 30 minutes. Your ASN has to be communicated to a customer, or you're going to be in trouble when it comes from a rating standpoint. But with classic EDI, since there's so many steps, it's almost impossible to know, did my customer receive that ASN? Where did it break down somewhere? So we've created an ASN dashboard, and when I was in industry, if I had this tool, I would have. It would have made my life so much easier, because we were talking about it for years internally. How can we create a dashboard so we can see, did the ASN go through correctly all the way through to the customer? And with strategic, we've delivered that. Our team is they created the vision, they had the vision, they created the solution, and it's just a wonderful tool for operations.
So since I came from industry as well, you're telling me that lovely ASN we used to send out and be like, wow, we got it out in 26 minutes. I had 4 minutes to spare. I now have proofs when they call me and try to tell me we were late and ding us. There's a dashboard saying, nope, you received that in 22 and a half minutes, past the time we received the order.
Exactly. And then we can leverage that also and create alerts. So if you're out to lunch, you set up alerts and you're getting within 20 minutes, you can get a text message on your phone.
Oh,
so it's wonderful stuff. Yeah.
That's going to change a lot of lives for people that sweat when those things go out. And we all know who those people are.
That's right.
That's an incredible tool set. The EDI messaging report, the monitoring dashboard, the invoice and the ASN dashboard. I mean, you're putting things that used to be looking through lines of data in an Excel file type of format into a usable dashboard where someone can easily just check on it and move on like it's not a big part of your day, where this used to be someone's lifeblood, right? You're sweating on the you're sweating on the seat.
It's exception management, right?
Absolutely.
Exception management is absolutely critical to efficient operations.
And so we talked about how we can do this with SIG EDI, but you can also do it with traditional EDI, right? So some of the SIG-Serve offerings still support traditional EDI. So if you're just looking to have help with your current system because it's overwhelming, we still have a team that can support the traditional mappings. Do these reports and these work with traditional EDI, or does it only work with SIG EDI?
They absolutely do. They work against the QED repository. So sometimes customers won't send back information acknowledgments, but they absolutely work. They read the QED repository. SIG EDI just optimizes the translation side of it. These other tools are just optimized ways of managing your EDI. So yeah, they are mutually exclusive.
Nice. So if we've got a very large, let's say, automotive account that has already got all their maps set up, but they would really love to have this invoice and ASN dashboard and just run off dashboarding and exception management, that's more of a plug and play. It doesn't have to necessarily be at the single map, but it allows them to have that capability to really address these things as we move forward.
Yeah, and the key to it is just talking to us. If we understand what your problems are, what your infrastructure is, we can come up with these proposals for you to understand. Here, use this, or maybe this tool will work better for you. We can mentor you and help you make this optimized.
Absolutely. And I know that we do, one of our biggest presentations we do at all user groups is surrounding our tool sets and our offering of software, specifically EDI being probably the most common as of late. So if you're at a Midwest, Southeast, West Coast, stop by. I'm sure one of our breakout sessions will have the SIG EDI tool set. You can talk more with either yourself or Vinod or myself, depending on who's there that day, or your local representative. But I think that's a value that should be not understated. Even if you're not going to the single map, there's a level of tools and dashboards that are at your disposal if need be. One question that always comes to mind when people ask is, how hard is it? Does this interrupt your traditional EDI if you're going to make the switch?
Yeah, no, it doesn't. If you make a switch to SIG EDI, it's essentially done by document. But typically, we'll go one trading partner at a time. So you can do a big bang. You can literally, set up all the maps and switch over from traditional EDI to SIG EDI, big bang, all of those documents. But that's not what we recommend, honestly. It is essentially every document flow we can control, whether it goes through a translation standard process or goes through SIG EDI. So very simple for us to manage. It's non-intrusive, tested and verified. And yeah, we can do it at whatever the pace is. Either customer can do it or we can do it for them.
That's awesome. Well, we've caught up on a good 30 some odd minutes of discussing EDI, and I know you and I could talk EDI for hours because it's been a part of our lives. For those listening, please reach out at strategic.com, come to one of our user group events, come to any of our speaking points. Love to discuss it more with you in greater detail and see how it can, of course, positively impact your business. I always usually end with a question, Paul, for somebody to, give me a high level, how is it changing the world? What should they come away with? I'm actually going to skip it and say from my side of the fence, it's the manage by exception and use dashboarding in these tools to help streamline your day. Is there what would you say is the closing reason why to look at the tool set that Strategic's bringing to the table around EDI?
Well, I won't disagree with what you said there, but I will add to it, and it's cost savings. Honestly, we can provide an ROI to prove that this makes sense. It just makes sense. It simplifies things, and it will save you a load of money.
That's awesome. Well, I appreciate your time today on the podcast, Paul. I'm sure we'll be catching up in the future as we do snippets at some of these user group events. But thank you for your time and have a great rest of your day.
You're welcome, Andrew. Take care.
Take care.